All right, everybody. If you had to pick an actor to play your life in a movie, who would you pick? I'll go first to give everybody a little bit of a moment to think about it. I would definitely pick Elizabeth Olsen. I'm just saying. Mad props, similar age group, so I don't feel a little bit weird about picking somebody younger than me, older than me. And because I was a Mary-Kate and Ashley fan when I was younger, and my best friends were twins, so they were clearly Mary-Kate and Ashley, so I had to pick their sister to role play as a child. And so I'm like, pretty much I've already role played her life, so I feel like vice versa, right? It just totally works that way. That's how these things work. So I'm telling myself. Anybody else have an answer at the tip of their tongue? Right.
Not at all.
I'll say not at the tip of my tongue, but with a not to imply that he would, right? Because this person's career is probably past having to play me in a movie. But Daniel Radcliffe would be very cool.
I like that. I think that you're underplaying the importance of your life, man.
Or even Matthew Lewis, who played Neville Longbottom.
Yes.
In the Harry
He
Potter
was
movies,
great in the Me Before You movie too.
Yeah.
When he wasn't Neville, even though I loved him in Harry Potter. So, but I'm seeing a theme of your Harry Potter casting.
Yeah, for some reason I'm just picking British people.
How about for me? I'm gonna go just very classy, Julia Roberts.
Ooh.
She has been in like a lot of different roles, and I think too, like as I've changed over the years and evolved into a 41-year-old, Julia just hits the mark for me. So I'm gonna go with that one.
I love it. I could see it. I can get behind it.
Platson, and you're
I
okay
mean,
with
for the absolute moment, I'm thinking Cameron Diaz as she played in Charlie's Angels.
Not in The Holiday, because that would also, I could see that.
Well, maybe.
In a very nice way, in a way that says that's one of my favorite movies and a holiday tradition, not in like a, but no, I get behind it. I could see it.
I like
Or
that.
I did just see the Glass Onion, and Ana de Armas was awesome, and I'm like, I like her in that, and she could play me if she wanted to.
Right, I know. I'm like, this is with the full assumption that none of our lives are interesting enough to cast somebody to sit in their home office and stare at a computer screen, but just in case we ever did something more exciting than this, and they were willing to take a serious pay cut and be in a low budget film, yes, 100%. No, this is awesome. And to kind of pivot to what we're talking about today, right? Privacy at the workplace and home. So welcome everybody, Tech for Business podcast. We're doing season 2 today. We're joined by Anne and Matthew, who are both GRC analysts in our security department. And then Tara and myself are moderating for our marketing department. We'll kind of start off going ahead. What spawned this as a topic for both of you? I know there's a lot of things that we could be talking about. How do you want to lead into this discussion today?
So I have a lot of, I'm fully remote. Let's start there. So a lot of the stuff that I do, I have to keep in mind, not just the privacy of the business, but my own personal privacy. I have a lot of technology at home, not just business, but for things that I just do to keep the home safe or easy to organize. As part of that, there is a lot of data that flows into and out of my home. So keeping that segmented, keeping it safe, deciding what's right for me and what's right for others. And then on top of that, there was a security flaw found in the camera system that I use not too long ago, which I think is when this conversation originally started. And what that could mean. What do you do if you're finding that, if you're not as technical and maybe don't know how to keep on top of that as well? That was what started the conversation for me. And I think sending articles to all of you about those as I tried to fix it as quickly as possible.
And I, from a data segregation, having come from a home office situation, I'm not remote typically, but over the last 2 years was, and having kids that were remote students at the same time, trying to segregate where that overlap is, and also manage the controls that I want to have for my kids and my family without being overly burdensome, but protective of both my role at CIT and the data that's so important to our business, and the separation. That's always my my big understanding, or my big concern, making sure things are separated and in the right box where those divide and are protected.
That makes perfect sense of kind of setting those boundaries, right? Of what's where. I'd love to hear both of you kind of talk about what we do at CIT. I know we've mentioned, right, where you're both working, what your kind of personal experiences have been to prompt this discussion, but what we do as a company, and then what are those boundaries kind of between workplace and personal? I'll let you guys take that wherever you want a tangent.
Well, as you mentioned, Anne and I are both GRC analysts. However, we do have different sections within that. So I work. We both work obviously with external customers, but Anne also works very heavily on the internal side of things, which her domain. And the way that all ties in is that we spend a lot of time, more time than most people, far more time than most people want to spend, talking about compliancy and federal regulations and changes that are coming through. The FTC podcast that we've done, Anne and I spent probably triple-digit hours talking about those FTC regulations before the podcasts were done, just in general. So that's what we do, and that's how CIT helps within those spaces. And do you want to talk about the internal side of things a little bit and kind of what that looks like?
Well, it really comes full circle with every oversight agency entity that we both keep apprised of regulation changes, evolutions. We have to understand what that means for CIT, not just our customers but CIT. That said, while we aren't specifically governed by a number of these, we implement so many of the controls that these regulatory agencies and entities have. That includes everything from something as simple as our acceptable use, where this would evolve into our privacy boxes. An acceptable use is one of those first controls that you can implement as this is what we should do, this is what we must do, this is what we can't do. And I had mentioned to Matthew before this, while it's unlikely you would have that at home, it is definitely a discussion that you would always want to have to make everyone aware. And that's from a very young age of kids, even to spouses, family members that may not necessarily understand what that means, and trying to help apply the controls. An acceptable use isn't necessarily a policy, isn't necessarily just a signed on, yes, I understand, but it really is that implementation of, we want to be conscientious of where all of our boxes are and how we protect those. I think
that was brilliant. That's it. Yeah. I really enjoyed that. I think that leads as well into that next step of boundaries, right? And a lot of this, there is a lot to cover here. So just very briefly, the distinctions I want to make when we're talking about this in terms of privacy, we're talking about it in terms of 4 separate things and the crossover they have. So we're talking about about the business, we're talking about your personal, we're talking about in the workplace, and we're talking about at home. And so the crossover here is when we talk about your business privacy, we're talking about it in the workplace as well as at home. When we talk about your personal privacy, we're talking about it in the workplace and at home. And there will be different levels of that everywhere. I have an example that I'd like to cover quickly because I think it covers one of those ones that maybe people don't think about as often, which was at a previous employer, I had a customer that was able to get on my nerves very easily. And they had a tendency to call me out of hours to expect things to be done that were far outside the scope of the work. As someone who was often at that time very likely to just stop and do whatever was requested to get the work done, my partner was very, I'm trying to think of the word. She did this very nicely, but she was very clear that that was not appropriate. That A, I should stop taking those calls. B, I needed to stop talking about that customer at home because I was getting too angry every time I did. That was no longer something that was a boundary that she had created for the home. It was about the business side of things, but it was a personal boundary about that to create this space. And I think that that's a good way of thinking about this. What type of things can you talk about at work that you wouldn't talk about at home? What types of things are important to keep in mind in both locations? And then, as Anne mentioned, it's family related as well. From the business perspective and from home, we often want to think of it from the business perspective, the data perspective, but it's not just that. It's how comfortable do you feel talking about certain things, sharing certain things. When we talk about HIPAA, this is a very clear distinction. You can't talk about things that are identifiable about patients, etc. You can't share that information. But when it comes down to from that personal side and creating those boundaries for yourself, it's just slightly different, and it creates this same scenario. When we're all working from home, can your partner hear everything you're saying during your work meetings? Is that appropriate? Etc.
Yeah, to dovetail on what Matthew said, it's easier when there is a specific regulatory entity to apply the controls to. When what one person assumes is common sense of one type of data is applied inconsistently because perceptions change. Someone may not care about sharing their HIPAA data. And again, that's really easy to black and white that piece. But I say this to my kids, it's not your data to share. And it's hard to say just because you may know something doesn't mean it's something that you should be home or office sharing among coworkers, anything. And like Matthew said, the range of drawing those boundaries is more and more difficult once there isn't it is super easy to say my date of birth and my health status is not shareable. But when it gets into, well, what is the project status of customer XYZ? They may be very sensitive. Is it actually a violation of any law? Probably not. Is it against our privacy statement? It is. That makes it a little easier, but it's ongoing education of what those rules are and where we determine those boundaries. Again, home office, that is also very key in trying to communicate where we want to draw the box.
Yeah. And you and I have spoken of this before, but one of my favorite examples of this that came through the CMMC training was about organizations who lost federal contracts because people congratulated them on winning the contract prior to that becoming public knowledge.
Yep.
So obviously there's a lot of regulations with that, and these things will impact your business. But it's just, it could be something as simple as your partner overhearing it and mentioning it to a friend, and that person posting it on Facebook as a congratulations on a post you make about having good news in the future. Or in the case of the example that was given, posting congratulations on a completely unrelated post. So really, I think it's super important to kind of sit down and think about that. And you probably know what those limits are with your partner, and with your family. I'm sure we all know and have known people who overshare far too often. And it feels like you just, how are we having that conversation right now in this meeting? Those are the types of things you want to know are comfortable with everyone. And the same works on that business perspective. What are you taking home with you? What are you not taking home with you? Deciding what compliance and guidelines you're going to follow from a business perspective is the equivalent of having that conversation with your family. And once you know, and if you do have regulations to follow at home, kind of deciding how that's going to look and what everyone can do from home. One of the things that I think about often is, I believe, and Anne, correct me if I'm wrong here, the SOC 2 requirement of workstations not being visible from windows or doors in a work from home scenario.
Or protected in such a way that they're not visible to others.
Yeah, that's right. There can be privacy screens, right?
Or how do you, those without it need to know isn't in the phrase, but it's something to that effect.
I always take from it, if someone can walk in or walk through past the door or look through the window and see your screen, you haven't met that requirement.
Yes.
And so we personally, I see this a lot. You'll go past, the bigger hospitals, and you'll see that there's a screen that you can see that's like shining on the window. That always stresses me out, because if someone were to be malicious and get a telescope or binoculars, they probably could read some of that data. But those types of things are things you want to think about when you're at home as well. And personally, that created a very awkward environment for me in my home office, because there is the windows here and the doors back there. And so I had to twist my desk specifically to make it work. I feel this can be a very tricky conversation, especially when you're creating these guidelines at home. Any recommendations, Anne?
I have three boys. I'll leave this with, I have three boys, and all three are very different in how they absorb information. One will walk by whatever I'm doing out of sight and pay no attention to whatever I am doing at my desk. The other will walk up and say, hey, can I do something? And again, even if he can see what I'm doing, the third will notice something unrelated. Oh my gosh, that's a great logo. What is that from? And start to ask more questions about what I'm doing. So the management as a whole is so unique and difficult, but I see that exact scenario in the workplace as well. Each person that you encounter has a different set of personal rules in data sharing or data absorption. I am very I don't want to know. I don't need to know. Please don't tell me if you don't want me to know it. I truly don't care. I promise I will not be hurt by you not telling me this. Please don't. Where there's others that are like, oh, please, I want to hear the whole thing. And I do find myself, it's really hard. Part of the struggle I always bring into both privacy and that risk of associated with managing privacy well is your basic cultural norms too, because a typical Midwesterner wants to share, not overshare, but share exactly how everything, because I do it to myself, but but it's not for public, it's for certain people, I guess, if that makes sense. So that has been a continual learning cycle of mine, to completely go tangent on this, but the privacy element always comes back to the back of my brain to say, who am I sharing this with? Do they need to know? Do I want them to know? Is there a relevant need? What's the protection standard on it? If that makes sense. And that very often falls in the common sense category, if that I'm saying that a lot, that it just makes it very difficult. But that continued reminder, even at home or the workplace, to say, these are the rules. Hi, Tara, I went to the store today and I found this super great deal. You can tell everybody. Like, Matthew, we had a customer that had a really difficult transition and the CEO has left. That is not for anything outside of this. So having to add those additional controls, maybe even per conversation, seems overly arduous, but sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah. I completely agree.
I'll come back from my tangent. Sorry.
No, I really, I was going to say, I really liked that tangent, because at least it helped me understand a little bit. Because, right, if you're doing kind of a self-analysis and you're going, well, man, like, I work at home with my husband here all the time. Granted, yes, I'm wearing headphones, and yes, I'm not customer facing. So, right, there's a kind of difference level. But, right, kind of when you're going through and going, okay, well, what's workplace drama and what's, right, okay to kind of be like, okay, I need to vent this without then going into, now I've spilled the beans on things that shouldn't be said or shown. And then the other part that my brain kind of goes to is, well, on the personal privacy side of things, let's say I'm chatting with Matthew and I'm going, you would not believe what just happened in this meeting, yada, 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 right? All of these things. How do business owners handle that sort of situation? Because we know it's happening, and now that we're hybrid first, so many of these things now are detailed, and right, we've heard the like, hey, so and so asked for the transcript of this. What's considered personal privacy, and does that, I'm guessing it depends, is probably half the answer here.
Yes.
But I would love to hear from your two's perspective of like, what's the best practice there in an ideal world.
So the FTC just had their FTC Con, which I thoroughly enjoyed, just in case you guys want to know how I spend my weekends. And the goal of it was to cover a lot of changes that are coming through, and conversations around big data, especially when it came to employee interactions and things like that. And the short version is that if you're using your company's tools to communicate, those communications are theirs. All of them. I know it seems pretty obvious and clear, but it needs to be restated, I think, every day. If you're using tools that your company provided to chat, phones your company provided, anything they provided, or in some cases, even if you've, and this is generally overreach, I believe, of the tools, but sometimes the mobile device management or MDM solutions you can get are on your device, tracking more than they should. They may be tracking who you call if it's work related, if you're using things like Teams, or if you have business Skype accounts, it's tracking those as well. And those things are removing that privacy from you because you're using work solutions to do it. So my belief and the logic that I use with that is, if I'm using something that is work related, it's always public. And just as a quick tangent, there is Slack conversations from Twitter that were had multiple years ago that are now being brought to light in news articles, because a journalist has been given free access to their Slack. So while that's obviously a over the top example, I personally can't imagine how stressful that must be for some of these people when throwaway basically texts that they sent 5+ years ago are now being posted in some of the biggest websites in the world. And that could happen to you, is the fear I'm trying to instill.
We've got to a very happy place with this conversation.
There is no such thing as privacy. There is only the business.
Everything is
There's
watching
suddenly
your
a
lives to
cloud
somebody
and
else.
thunder and like,
So how do we get around that? Is we don't have private conversations using work hardware. And then one of my big things is knowing what that scope creep is on MDM solutions. So before installing any of those tools on my phone, I spoke with our director of cybersecurity and I found out exactly what data is gathered so that I knew. So I didn't feel uncomfortable with it. Otherwise, I just wouldn't have put Teams on my phone. That's my way, my private or my personal boundary is to find out what the boundaries of the other tools are so that I can then feel comfortable with that rather than just accepting it and going without checking.
to put a big circle around that, I always want to tell people what they can do rather than, yes, there's this control and it's not necessarily going to be easy to execute, but this is what we can do, or this is what we should do, rather than, and I would love to be a compliance officer saying, no, 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 no. But the reality is we have to do business. That's at home and at work and everything. So we want to do the best with the tools that we have and make ourselves aware. That conversation and putting a bow on it to say, this is not for outside of this, tell this to the world, those kind of controls, those are perfect recurring educational pieces that we can be doing all the time to say, yes, we can, but let's do this to make this the best possible scenario.
That makes perfect sense. Last week, Todd talked about saying the same thing 7 times, 7 ways. And I feel like that's a reiteration of this. That was about just technology in general. But Anne, I feel like
does not work on teenagers. I'll just add that. Like, it is about 22 to 50 times, but that's okay. I'm learning.
We're saying it's a minimum of it depends on your audience. Yeah, we've all had people like that. 100%, but I know we're kind of running up on time here, but is there any advice that you would give to somebody who's maybe a business owner and going, I didn't consider these things, and how do I make sure that my team starts taking the next steps? What would kind of be the baby steps to start putting this in place?
I want to reiterate Anne's awareness comment, because that's what it comes down to. Are you aware of where your data is? Are you aware of where that data is going? Creating workflows, logical and ephemeral, of what your data is doing from a business perspective is going to give you that insight, as well as what you're gathering that you don't realize you're gathering. Review those things. If you are using MDM, the Azure tools, just want to grab as much as possible. So you can limit them. You can limit what they're doing. That's where I personally would start. And then the personal sharing that we talked about comes down to the culture that you're creating. People need to be able to talk with each other. You don't want to say you can't talk about your home life at the office. It'll be a very sad place. So kind of having that awareness of what it is that you're trying to build and what it is you're trying to do. And then also, like I said, where your data is going is the recommendation I have.
I couldn't say it better. The awareness and knowing what you have and what you want to protect and how. It's not a no scenario anymore. It's not a you can't. It's a how can we best protect.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. But if anybody listening to has additional tangent questions, as we've shown, we love to talk. So by all means, anybody can reach out. You can email us info@cit-net.com or head out to our website, cit-net.com/podcast. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Matthew, so much for sitting down chatting with us. Tara for listening in, smiling and nodding right along with me. And we will be back next week with another episode.
Awesome. Thank you all.